All right, so as promised, we're going to talk a little bit about measuring and classifying angles. First off, vocabulary words.
Angle, vertex, degrees, protractor.
All right, if you need to go back over those, just hit rewind for a moment and then take another look.
How can you measure an angle? Think about this question during the lesson.
Okay, how can we measure
How can you measure an angle? Think about this question during the lesson. An angle is formed by two rays that have the same endpoint. The common endpoint of the two rays is called the vertex, plural vertices.
vertex? Point B is the vertex of these two rays.
The rays are the sides of the angle. The two rays that form the angle are ray BA and ray BC. How do you name an angle? You use an angle symbol followed by the names of the 3 points that make the angle. The vertex point must be the middle letter.
Yeah, remember, the vertex point has to be the middle letter in that. Middle letter.
How would you name this angle?
So think about a few ways you could name the angle. Pause it if you have to.
You can name this angle 3 ways: angle ABC, angle CBA, or angle B. When you measure an angle, what part of the angle are you measuring?
So think about what part of the angle are you measuring?
You are measuring the space between the two rays when you measure an angle. You can use a protractor to measure and draw angles. Angles are measured in degrees. It takes 90 degrees to fill a square corner.
So if we think about a square corner, think about this 90 right here is pointing straight in the very center of this half circle here, and then it goes all the way down to this little dot right there. So that, and then if we go across on this side, there's a square corner there. Right here is a square corner. And then you also have one over here. If we take our 90 degrees and we go across to the left, there's also a square corner there.
How do you use a protractor to measure the degrees of an angle?
Notice how we put the angle in here, and we've got the vertex right here in the middle, and then our flat ray going out across the line at the bottom. And notice for a minute that there is a number here up top and there's a number here at the bottom. We're going to explain why there are two different numbers here in a moment.
To measure an angle, place the protractor's center on the angle's vertex. Place the 0 degrees mark on one side of the angle. Read the measure where the other side of the angle crosses the protractor.
So notice that this line is going through the protractor here, so we figure out how close, what number are we getting close to there?
Which set of numbers on the protractor should you use to measure this angle?
So you've got a set of numbers here, 60, 120. It's kind of going in between 60 and 50, a little closer to 60 than 50, a little closer to 120 than 30. Notice these numbers are counting up, 120, 130, 140 as you go to the right. But notice these numbers, the smaller ones, count up as you go to the left, 40, 50, 60, 70. Notice that that's kind of an important thing to think about.
Use the inside set of numbers. These numbers start with 0 where the protractor is lined up with the ray. In what way is measuring with a protractor similar to measuring with a ruler? You must always line up the vertex with 0 on the protractor, just like you start a measure of length from 0 on the ruler.
And one thing I want to point out is I have a protractor here, and then I have a ruler right here. Now one thing that you want to do when you're measuring with a protractor, you're kind of starting in the middle right here. With a ruler, you're starting on the far end. That's your 0 point right there. Your 0 on the protractor is actually right there. So kind of like that is how you're measuring right there.
The measure of angle PQR is 56 degrees. How would you use a protractor to draw an angle of 140 degrees?
Now if we look at the protractor here, you're thinking about the fact that we've got a point right there. We'll try to focus that a little bit. I wish it would stay in focus. Notice there's a 140 here, but there's also a 140 right over here. So we got to figure out how are we going to draw an angle that's 140 degrees. If I say, oh, well, I can draw a point here, and I can draw a point here, and then maybe I'll draw a line this way, and I've got my point right there, so I'll go ahead and I'll draw that, and we'll say, okay, all right, there. That's 140 degrees. No, not really. Remember, if a 90-degree angle is right here, and we notice that this 90-degree angle is a lot bigger, it opens up a lot wider than this one, then how can this angle be 140 degrees when we know that this angle right here is 90? So obviously we did something wrong. If we go back and realize we lined it up, let's try this 140 here, and then draw a line going this way. And notice now that this angle right here is much wider than our 90-degree angle. So here's 140, here's 90, and then this one right here, if we measure that, this one is actually about 41 degrees. About 41 degrees right there. As the angle gets wider, the number gets bigger until you get all the way until you have a straight line. And a straight line is 180 degrees. Okay? So if it's open at its widest, it's 180 degrees. And I'm going to draw a line that direction, like that. That's 180 degrees. Straight line. Okay? As the angle gets smaller, the number gets smaller.
Draw a ray TU. Be sure to label the endpoint T. Place the protractor center on T. Line up ray TU with the 0 degrees mark. Place a dot at 140 degrees. Label it W. Then draw ray TW. How do you know which letter was the vertex of the ray TU?
So think about that for a moment. How do you know which letter is the vertex of the TU?
The vertex point was the point named first. Which set of numbers on the protractor should you use to measure this angle?
So again, the set of numbers, either this one or this one, 40 or 140. Now in the example before, what I did was I had this line first, okay, and then I drew this line. And then notice that when I drew this line, I opened up this one, and this one's 140 degrees. But notice how that's different than this one. It's kind of like a mirror image. Okay, so the wider the angle, the bigger the number. The smaller the number, bring that back up. The smaller the angle, right here, the lower the number. Okay?
Use the outside set of numbers to measure this angle. These numbers start with 0 where it is lined up with the ray TU.
Okay, I'm finished drawing my little picture example here. Okay, so same thing. Right here I've got my angle, that's 140 degrees. Now notice that if we start at 0 here, we go 10, 20, we're counting up 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, 120, 130, 140 degrees.
The measure of WTU is 140 degrees. You can now measure an angle in degrees using a protractor.